Today, we're going to dive into a world of terror and mystery, where the night becomes even darker and scarier. We're talking, of course, about werewolves. These legendary beings, who appear under the light of the full moon, have captured people's imagination and fear for centuries. In this video, we'll explore 7 horror stories involving werewolves, each one more chilling than the last. From unexpected transformations to sinister pacts, we'll dive into a universe where fear and adrenaline mix. So get ready for a frightening and thrilling journey. And if you're not part of our community yet, don't waste any more time. Subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss any of our horror and adventure videos. Activate the bell to receive notifications and stay up to date with everything that happens here. 1. The Night of the Full Moon. The village of Saint-Pierre, hidden among the icy valleys of the French Alps, was a place where time seemed to have stood still. With its stone houses and snow-covered roofs, the place exuded tranquility. The villagers lived in harmony with nature, harvesting its fruits in summer and warming themselves around the fireplaces in winter. But there was something that disturbed this peace, an ancient legend that haunted the nights of the full moon. It was said that in ancient times, a man had been cursed for betraying his own family. Since then, every full moon, he transformed into a monstrous creature, half man, half wolf, who roamed the forests around the village. The elders said that the werewolf was real and that he still lived among them, hiding in plain sight. At the beginning of fall, the villagers began to notice strange signs. Animals disappeared from the farms without a trace. Huge footprints were found in the fresh snow near the forests. Long, frightening howls echoed through the mountains at night. Fear began to spread like a shadow over Saint-Pierre. Among the residents was Léon, a young painter who had moved to the village in search of inspiration. He was fascinated by the local stories and saw the legends as an opportunity to create his darkest works. However, Léon didn't believe in monsters or curses until that night. It was a cold, clear night when Léon decided to go out and paint under the light of the full moon. He walked to a clearing in the forest, where he set up his easel and began to work. Everything was silent, except for the distant sound of the wind blowing through the trees. Suddenly, a deep howl cut through the air, making Léon freeze in place. It was unlike any sound he had ever heard. It didn't sound like an ordinary wolf. He looked around, but saw nothing but the dancing shadows created by the moonlight. Léon decided to head home before anything worse happened. As he walked along the narrow path, he felt as if he was being watched. He hurried his steps, but the sounds behind him also increased. Branches breaking, leaves being trampled. Something or someone was following him. When he reached the village, he found the streets deserted and all the windows closed. Only old lanterns illuminated the winding path to his house. He quickly went inside and locked the door behind him. But that night, even safely inside his room, he couldn't sleep. The next morning, Léon decided to investigate the events of the night before. He went to the local tavern to talk to the older locals about the legend of the werewolf. "If you want answers," said one of the men with a dark look on his face, "talk to Pierre." Pierre was a solitary man who lived on the outskirts of the village. He rarely interacted with the other residents and had a reputation for being eccentric. Some said he knew more about the werewolf curse than anyone else. Léon went to Pierre's hut that frosty afternoon. When he knocked on the door, he was greeted by a tall, thin man with tired eyes and an unkempt beard. "What do you want?" asked Pierre in a hoarse voice. "I want to know about the werewolf," replied Léon bluntly. Pierre hesitated before opening the door wide and letting him in. The hut was dark and smelled of burnt wood. Old books were piled up in every corner, along with strange objects that Léon didn't recognize. "You shouldn't mess with this," said Pierre as he lit a candle. "The curse is real." Pierre told Léon a disturbing story. He was a direct descendant of the man cursed centuries ago. The curse had been passed down through generations in his family as an unavoidable burden. "I'm the last one," Pierre said with sadness in his eyes, "and every time there's a full moon, I transform." Léon was shocked by the confession, but realized that Pierre wasn't a monster by choice. He was a victim of the curse. "Is there any way to break it?" asked Léon. Pierre explained that the only way to end the curse would be to destroy the object used to cast it, an ancient amulet hidden in a cave in the mountains near the village. The night after the full moon, Léon decided to help Pierre find the amulet and put an end to the curse once and for all. They set off together into the mountains under the starry sky. The cave was on a steep cliff surrounded by twisted, snow-covered trees. When they entered the icy darkness of the cave, they were greeted by an eerie silence, as if the air itself was holding its breath. At the back of the cave was an ancient altar made of black stone. On it rested the amulet, a silver chain encircling a dark stone that seemed to pulsate as if it were alive. "That's it," whispered Pierre as his eyes shone with hope and fear at the same time. Before they could grab the amulet, a deafening roar echoed through the cave. Pierre began writhing on the ground as his body changed before Léon's horrified eyes. He was transforming again. The werewolf advanced on Léon with sharp claws and eyes glowing like embers. Léon managed to dodge the initial attack and ran to the altar to get the amulet. With all his might, Léon raised the amulet above his head and shouted, "Let this curse end now!" An intense light emanated from the amulet as it shattered in his hands. The werewolf let out an agonizing scream before falling to the ground. When the light disappeared, Pierre was there again, human and free of the curse. Pierre thanked Léon for saving him and promised to restart his life away from the shadows of the past. The village returned to peace, but the villagers never forgot the terrifying nights under the full moon. As for Léon, he painted his most famous picture, The Night of the Werewolf, forever immortalizing the horrors of that night in the icy mountains of Saint-Pierre. 2. The Curse of the Werewolf. On a cold autumn night, Alexander, a young man of 19, was walking through the woods around the city of Prague in the Czech Republic. He had always enjoyed exploring the outskirts of the city, but that night something seemed different. The full moon illuminated the sky with a silvery light, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. As he walked, Alexander heard a distant howl. He stopped for a moment, thinking it was just a wolf, but soon realized that the sound was getting closer. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a werewolf. Alexander tried to run, but it was too late. The werewolf attacked him, biting him on the arm before disappearing into the forest. Over the next few days, Alexander began to feel strange changes in his body. He felt stronger and faster, but also more aggressive. During the nights of the full moon, he began to experience terrible transformations. His body became covered in hair, his hands turned into claws, and his eyes glowed like embers in the dark. Alexander knew he had to find a cure before it was too late. He began researching the legend of the werewolf, looking for a way to break the curse. Every night of the full moon, he transformed into a ferocious creature, losing control of himself. Alexander found an old magic book in an antique store that talked about the possibility of curing lycanthropy. The book mentioned that the only way to break the curse was to find an ancient amulet made of silver, which was hidden in a cave in the nearby mountains. Determined to find the amulet, Alexander set off for the mountains on the next full moon night. He knew it would be dangerous, but he had no other choice. During the journey, he faced many challenges, from wild wolves to earthquakes that threatened to collapse the cave. The journey to the cave was long and arduous. Alexander had to cross icy rivers and climb steep slopes, braving the biting cold and darkness. He carried a dim flashlight and a hand-drawn map, which guided him through the dense forest. As he approached the cave, Alexander began to feel the transformation approaching. His heart beat faster, and his senses became sharper. He knew he had to find the amulet before it was too late. When he finally found the amulet, Alexander realized that he wasn't alone. The werewolf that had bitten him was there, waiting for him. Alexander knew he had to use the amulet to break the curse before he turned again. With the amulet in hand, Alexander faced the werewolf in an intense battle. He used all his strength to keep control of himself as he fought the creature. The werewolf was strong and ferocious, but Alexander was determined to win. In the end, Alexander managed to defeat the werewolf and break the curse, freeing himself from the transformation. He felt immense relief when he realized that he was human again, without the werewolf's curse. Alexander returned to Prague a free man, no longer under the werewolf's curse. He never transformed again and lived the rest of his life in peace, but always remembering that terrible night in the forest. The legend of the werewolf continued to be told in Prague, but now it was just a story, a reminder of what Alexander had faced and overcome. Alexander realized that the experience had changed him forever. He had faced his deepest fears and emerged victorious. The werewolf's curse had been a terrible challenge, but also an opportunity to discover his own strength and resilience. He went on to help others who were going through similar situations, using his experience to guide those who were lost in the world of shadows. And so, Alexander's story became an inspiring legend in Prague, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, there is always a chance for redemption. Over time, Alexander became a respected figure in the community. He founded a support center for people affected by supernatural curses, helping them to find their own cures and overcome their challenges. Alexander's story served as a beacon of hope for many, showing that even the most terrible curses can be overcome with determination and courage. And so the legend of the werewolf continued to be told in Prague, but now it was a story of inspiration and overcoming, thanks to Alexander's legacy. Even after the cure, Alexander never forgot the sense of fear and respect he felt for the legend of the werewolf. He knew that somewhere there were still others who carried the curse, struggling to maintain control over their transformations. Alexander decided to travel the world, studying the different versions of the legend and helping those who were suffering from lycanthropy. He became an expert in the field, known for his courage and wisdom. And so Alexander's story spread to many countries, inspiring others to face their own challenges and overcome the shadows that haunted them. 3. The Werewolf of the Forest. In a dense, dark forest located in the mountains of Romania, an experienced hunter named Victor got lost during a hunt. Night was falling fast, and the full moon was beginning to rise in the sky, casting a silvery light over the forest. Victor knew he needed to find shelter before the night became even more dangerous. As he walked through the forest, Victor heard a strange, frightening howl. The sound seemed to come from all directions at once, and he felt a chill run down his spine. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a werewolf, but not as Victor had imagined. This one seemed more intelligent and cruel than the others, with eyes that shone like lanterns in the dark. The werewolf began to chase Victor, who ran desperately through the forest. The creature was fast and seemed to know exactly where it was going. Victor stumbled several times, but managed to get up and keep running. He knew he had to survive until dawn, when the werewolf would lose its power. During his run, Victor noticed that the forest seemed to change around him. The trees seemed to close in on him, and the sounds of the night became more intense. He felt as if he were being taken to an unknown destination, far from civilization. After running for hours, Victor spotted an abandoned hut in the distance. He ran towards it, hoping to find a safe place to hide. Upon entering the hut, Victor locked the door and prepared to face whatever came next. However, he soon realized that the hut wasn't as safe as it seemed. the werewolf began scratching at the door, trying to get in. Victor knew he had to keep the werewolf outside until dawn. He used everything he could find in the hut to bar the door, from furniture to tools. However, the werewolf was persistent and kept trying to get in. As the night wore on, Victor began to feel more and more tired. The werewolf didn't seem to tire, and his determination to get into the hut only increased. Victor knew he had to stay alert if he wanted to survive. He began to explore the hut in search of something he could use against the werewolf. He found an old rusty knife and some rope, which he used to create a makeshift trap. However, the werewolf was too clever and managed to avoid the trap with ease. When the night seemed endless, the werewolf finally managed to open a crack in the door. Victor was prepared and used his knife to try to ward off the creature. However, the werewolf was too strong, and Victor began to lose hope. Just when all seemed lost, the sky began to lighten. The werewolf, feeling the power of the full moon waning, retreated and disappeared into the forest. Victor, exhausted, left the hut and watched the sun rise over the forest. He had survived the night of terror. Victor never forgot the night he faced the werewolf of the forest. He returned to his town, but the experience had changed him. He began to study the legend of the werewolf, determined to better understand the creature that had almost killed him. The forest, once a place of hunting and adventure, now became a place of fear and respect. Victor knew that although he had survived, the memory of that frightening night would remain with him forever. Over time, Victor realized that the experience had made him stronger and wiser. He learned to respect nature and to fear the creatures that inhabited the shadows. The legend of the werewolf continued to be told in his town, but now it was a story of survival and courage, a reminder of what Victor had faced and overcome. Years later, Victor founded a center for the study of supernatural creatures, where young researchers could learn about the legends and myths that had been forgotten. He also created a protection program for areas where these creatures were more common, helping to preserve nature and ensure that stories like his were not repeated. And so, Victor's story became an inspiring legend, a reminder that, even in the darkest of nights, there is always a chance for redemption and overcoming. Victor spent years studying the legend of the werewolf, traveling to different parts of the world to gather information. He discovered that lycanthropy was more common than he imagined, and that there were many similar stories in different cultures. He wrote a book about his findings, which became a bestseller. Victor became an expert in the field, known for his courage and wisdom, and so Victor's story spread to many countries, inspiring others to face their own challenges and overcome the shadows that haunted them. Years later, Victor founded a center for the study of supernatural creatures, where young researchers could learn about the legends and myths that had been forgotten. He also created a protection program for areas where these creatures were more common, helping to preserve nature and ensure that stories like his were not repeated. The center became a reference point for those seeking to better understand the world of shadows. Victor worked tirelessly to ensure that the information was accurate and that people were prepared to face the challenges that nature presented. If you're enjoying the stories so far, don't waste any more time. Subscribe to our channel and activate the bell to receive notifications. And if you like the video, don't forget to like it too. This will really help my work and make sure you don't miss out on any new videos. 4. The Village of the Wolves. In a remote region of France, surrounded by dense forests and misty mountains, a photographer called Julien arrived in the small village of Saint-Loup. He was looking for unique landscapes for his next photo project, attracted by rumors that the region was one of the last places untouched by time. The village had a rustic charm: stone houses with slate roofs, narrow cobbled streets, and an old church in the center. But as soon as he arrived, Julien sensed something strange in the air. The locals watched him in silence, with suspicious looks and forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Julien stayed in the village's only inn, run by Madame Rousseau, a kind-looking but tired-looking old woman. She welcomed him warmly, but seemed anxious that he should stay only as long as necessary. "There's not much to see around here apart from the trees and the mountains," she said, as she handed him the room key. "It's a quiet place, but it's not for everyone." During dinner that evening, Julien tried to strike up a conversation with other guests and locals passing by the inn. However, everyone seemed to avoid prolonged contact. Some mumbled short replies before quickly walking away. Others simply ignored him. The only thing that seemed to unite everyone was the rush to get home before nightfall. That same night, Julien was awoken by strange sounds coming from the forest near the village. Long, deep howls echoed in the darkness, mixed with the sound of breaking branches and something that sounded like heavy footsteps. He tried to ignore the noises, but curiosity won out. Grabbing his camera and a flashlight, he left the inn and headed into the forest. The full moon partially illuminated the path between the tall trees, casting unsettling shadows on the ground covered in dry leaves. Julien found huge footprints in the muddy soil, much bigger than those of any wolf he had ever seen. He followed the marks until he came to a clearing where he witnessed something that defied all logic, a group of human figures turning into wolves before his eyes. Their bodies contorted as bones crackled and fur tore to give way to thick fur and sharp claws. The howls increased in intensity until they became almost deafening. Julien retreated in silence, trying not to be seen, and ran back to the inn with his heart racing. He could hardly believe what he had witnessed. The next morning, Julien noticed that the locals were even more suspicious of him. Whispers arose wherever he went, and furtive glances followed his every move. Determined to find out more about what he had seen the night before, he began to explore the village in search of answers. He visited the local church and found Father Bernard, an elderly man with tired eyes and a deep voice. The priest seemed to be the only one willing to speak openly with him. "You saw something you shouldn't have seen," said Bernard, after hearing Julien's insistent questions about the howling in the forest. The priest revealed that Saint-Loup carried an ancient curse. Centuries ago, during a brutal war against foreign invaders, the village's ancestors made a pact with a lupine entity to protect their land. In exchange for this supernatural protection, they were cursed to carry the gift of lycanthropy, the ability to transform into wolves under the light of the full moon. "It's not something we chose," said Bernard, with sadness in his eyes. "It's something we learned to live with, or die with." Julien was stunned by the revelation. He had spent his whole life believing that werewolves were just myths or scary stories told around the campfire. Now he was faced with living proof that these legends were real. As he continued to investigate discreetly, Julien discovered that not everyone in the village accepted his condition peacefully. A group led by a man called Etienne believed that werewolves should abandon their attempts at peaceful coexistence with humans and embrace their true nature as predators. Etienne saw Julien as a threat to the village's survival. "He's an outsider," said Etienne during a secret meeting in the forest that Julien accidentally attended while hiding behind the trees. "And outsiders bring trouble." Madame Rousseau confronted Julien that very night after noticing his growing interest in the village secret. "You must leave," she begged in a trembling voice. "If you stay here any longer, they won't allow it." But Julien was determined to document everything he had discovered, not just out of journalistic curiosity, but because he believed that revealing the existence of werewolves to the world could completely change human understanding of myth and reality. The night after his conversation with Madame Rousseau, Julien was captured by Etienne's followers while trying to photograph another transformation in the forest. They took him to a clearing where they planned to use him as an example to intimidate any other curious outsiders. However, before Etienne could carry out his cruel plan, Madame Rousseau arrived accompanied by other villagers loyal to the traditions of the village. A fierce battle raged under the light of the full moon as werewolves confronted werewolves in their bestial forms. Julien took advantage of the confusion to escape the clearing and return to the inn. There he retrieved his camera containing incredibly detailed images of the transformations and the battle in the forest. The next morning, Madame Rousseau confronted Julien for the last time as he packed to leave. "You have something dangerous in your hands," she said, pointing to her camera. "If you reveal our secret to the world, there will be no peace for us or for you." Julien faced a moral dilemma. Publishing his findings would mean exposing werewolves to global persecution or even extinction at the hands of humans. But keeping the secret would mean letting Saint-Loup continue to live under its curse in isolation from the rest of the world. When he finally left Saint-Loup that foggy afternoon, Julien carried with him the images he had captured in the forest, but he still didn't know if he would have the courage to use them. As he drove along the winding roads of the French mountains, he looked through the rearview mirror and saw Saint-Loup disappear into the mist, along with its dark secrets. 5. The Legend of the White Werewolf. In a town called Everwood, located in the United States, a legend began to spread about a white werewolf that was more powerful and fearsome than the others. The story went that this creature only appeared on nights with a full moon, and that its presence was an omen of disaster. A group of friends, led by a young girl called Ava, decided to investigate the truth behind the legend. They began collecting stories and accounts from people who claimed to have seen the white werewolf. The descriptions were always the same: a majestic and mysterious creature with eyes that shone like stars in the dark. On a night with a full moon, the group decided to patrol the city in search of any sign of the white werewolf. They were armed with cameras and recording equipment, hoping to capture some evidence. It was then that they saw him, an imposing figure in a bright white coat running through the deserted streets. Ava and her friends decided to follow the white werewolf, keeping a safe distance. They followed him into a forest on the outskirts of the city, where the creature disappeared into the darkness. Determined to find out more, they decided to explore the forest. Inside the forest, the group found a hidden cave. Inside, they discovered that the white werewolf was not just a legend, but a real creature that had been cursed by an ancient curse. The curse caused him to transform into a werewolf only on nights with a full moon, but with greater power and strength than the other werewolves. As the night progressed, Ava and her friends realized that they were surrounded by the white werewolf and other werewolves. They knew they had to find a way to escape before it was too late. Using their wits and the equipment they had, they came up with a plan to distract the creatures and escape. In the end, the group managed to escape the forest, but not before discovering that the white werewolf was actually a guardian of the town. He protected Everwood from unknown threats, and his presence was a sign that something was wrong. Ava and her friends decided to keep the white werewolf a secret, knowing that his existence was crucial to the town's safety. From that day on, the legend of the white werewolf became an important part of Everwood's history. People began to see the creature as a symbol of protection and no longer as a monster to be feared. And although the full moon remained a moment of suspense, Ava and her friends knew that the white werewolf was there, watching over the town. Years later, Ava became an expert in mythology, dedicating herself to studying the legend of the white werewolf. She traveled all over the world, collecting stories and legends about similar creatures. Although she never met another werewolf like the one in Everwood, Ava knew that the truth about these creatures was out there, waiting to be discovered. Even after years, Ava still felt a shiver run down her spine whenever she saw the full moon. She knew that somewhere the white werewolf was still watching, ready to defend the town from any threat. And although she survived the night in the forest, Ava never felt completely safe again, knowing that the terror of the werewolves was always lurking. Ava continued to monitor the white werewolf's activities, always on the lookout for any sign that it was active. She knew that the creature's presence was a constant reminder that the world was full of mysteries and dangers. And although the town was safe, thanks to the white werewolf, Ava never lost the feeling that something was always lurking, waiting to pounce. Ava became a respected figure in Everwood, known for her courage and determination to uncover the truth about the white werewolf. She inspired others to explore the unknown, and her story became a local legend, told for generations as a reminder of the power and mystery that exist beyond what we can see. 6. The Werewolf Hunt. In a dense and isolated forest in Romania, a group of experienced hunters gather around a campfire. Led by Lucian, a man hardened by years of battles against supernatural creatures, they have a single goal: to eliminate a werewolf that has reportedly been terrorizing nearby villages. The creature is described as incredibly strong and intelligent, with attacks that leave trails of destruction and mutilated bodies. For Lucian and his group, made up of 5 men armed with silver rifles and reinforced traps, this would be just another hunt in their careers. However, from the start of the journey, something seemed wrong. The forest was unusually silent, as if even the animals had fled. The tall trees blocked out the light of the full moon, plunging the atmosphere into an oppressive darkness. The wind carried a metallic smell that the hunters associated with blood, but none of them backed down. They were determined to fulfill their mission. On the first night of hunting, the hunters found clear signs of the werewolf's presence, huge footprints in the muddy soil and deep claw marks in the trees. They followed the tracks to a clearing where they spotted the remains of an animal carcass, a deer that had been completely torn apart. The blood was still fresh. "It's close," muttered Lucian as he surveyed the scene. He ordered the group to set traps around the clearing and remain absolutely silent. Hours later, the silence was broken by a guttural sound coming from the shadows. A pair of glowing eyes appeared from between the trees, followed by a massive figure that moved with frightening agility. The werewolf was bigger than any of them expected, with defined muscles under its black coat and claws as sharp as knives. The hunters opened fire immediately, but the creature was too fast. It attacked with ferocity, knocking down 2 men before disappearing into the darkness again. Lucian realized that they were dealing with something much more dangerous than they had imagined. The next morning, as they buried their dead companions, Lucian began to question the group's strategy. They were being watched and attacked at their most vulnerable moments. It seemed that the werewolf was toying with them, but what really disturbed Lucian was the growing feeling that there was something else in the forest. As they explored deeper into the terrain, they found strange symbols carved into the trees, markings that none of them recognized. Next to the symbols were human bones arranged in ritualistic patterns. One of the hunters suggested that they might be dealing with witchcraft or another kind of supernatural force besides the werewolf. That night, while they were setting up camp, they heard howls again, but this time it wasn't just a solitary sound. It was multiple howls echoing through the forest. "We're not just hunting one werewolf," Lucian finally said. "We're surrounded." The group was attacked shortly after dark. It wasn't just the original werewolf. There were at least 3 other similar creatures hiding in the shadows. The hunters fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. During the confrontation, Lucian noticed something even more disturbing. The creatures weren't just killing out of instinct or hunger. They seemed coordinated, almost strategic in their movements. It was as if they were protecting something or someone. The battle left only Lucian and 2 other survivors, Luca and Emil, alive. They fled to a nearby cave to take shelter and reorganize their thoughts. Inside the cave, the three men found something unexpected. Ancient paintings on the walls depicting human figures turning into wolves under the light of the full moon. In the center of the paintings was the image of a dark entity with glowing red eyes, something much larger than any werewolf. As they tried to decipher the images, they were interrupted by a deep voice echoing in the cave. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't a werewolf, but something much worse, an ancient vampire called Armand. Armand revealed that he was the true master of the forest and that the werewolves were his personal guardians. He explained that the hunters had invaded his sacred territory and upset the balance between the region's supernatural creatures. "You came here to kill monsters," said Armand with a cold smile, "but now you've realized that you're the intruders." Armand offered the survivors a cruel choice. They could swear allegiance to him and abandon their lives as hunters, or be killed right there by the werewolves waiting outside the cave. Lucien refused immediately and tried to attack Armand with his silver-plated knife, but was easily overpowered by the vampire's superhuman strength. Luca hesitated before betraying Lucien and accepting Armand's offer, while Emile desperately tried to flee into the forest, only to be captured by the werewolves minutes later. Lucien was left alive as a warning to other hunters. Never invade unknown territory without understanding the greater forces at play. Without his pack and carrying deep physical and emotional scars, Lucien returned to civilization a changed man. He knew he couldn't tell the truth about what happened in the forest without being considered insane. Meanwhile, Armand continued to rule his dark domain with his loyal werewolves at his side. Monsters protecting monsters in a fragile balance between supernatural predators and unsuspecting humans. And on the darkest nights, when the winds howled through the trees of the Romanian forest, it was said that the cries of the hunters could be heard, eternal reminders of his arrogance in defying forces beyond his comprehension. 7. The Werewolf's Legacy. In a small town called Castelvecchio, located in Italy, a young man called Alessandro inherited an ancient estate from a distant ancestor. The property, an imposing mansion, had been abandoned for decades, and Alessandro's family had always avoided talking about it. However, with the death of his last relative, Alessandro decided to explore the legacy he had received. When he arrived at the mansion, Alessandro felt a chill run down his spine. The house seemed to be waiting for him, and there was something sinister in the air. He began to explore the rooms, discovering old objects and books that seemed to have been forgotten for centuries. Every step he took seemed to echo off the walls, as if the house itself was watching him. While examining the books, Alessandro discovered that his ancestor had been a werewolf. The curse of lycanthropy had been passed down for generations, and now it seemed that Alessandro was the next to be affected. He read about how the transformation took place during the nights of the full moon, and how the family had kept it a secret for so long. The idea that he could turn into a ferocious wild creature terrified him. On the first full moon night after his arrival, Alessandro began to feel strange changes in his body. He felt superhuman strength, and his senses became sharper. However, along with these powers came a loss of control over his actions. Alessandro transformed into a werewolf, running through the forest around the mansion. The feeling of freedom and power was intoxicating, but also terrifying. Determined to understand what was happening to him, Alessandro began to research the legend of the werewolf. He discovered that the curse could be controlled, but that he had to learn to live with his new condition. Alessandro knew he had to find a way to balance his human life with his werewolf life. He began studying ancient rituals and looking for experts who could help him control the transformations. As the nights of the full moon approached, Alessandro faced greater and greater challenges. He had to learn to control his transformations and deal with the fear and rejection of others. However, he also discovered that the curse brought with it a power and strength he had never imagined he possessed. Alessandro began to feel more connected to nature and his own heritage, which helped him find purpose in his new life. In the end, Alessandro managed to control his transformations and learn to live with the curse. He became a guardian of the estate and the forest, using his power to protect what was his. The mansion, which had once seemed like a dark legacy, now became a symbol of his strength and determination. Alessandro realized that the curse was not only a curse, but also a blessing, as it gave him the opportunity to do something meaningful with his life. From that day on, Alessandro became a local legend known as the Werewolf of Castelvecchio. People began to see the creature as a guardian of the town and no longer as a monster to be feared. And although the full moon remained a moment of suspense, Alessandro knew he was prepared to face any challenge that came his way. Years later, Alessandro reflected on the legacy he had inherited. He realized that the curse of lycanthropy was not only a curse, but also a blessing. It gave him the opportunity to protect the town and the forest, and to become an important part of local history. And although the transformation was still a challenge, Alessandro knew he was ready to face it, knowing that he was more than just a werewolf. He was a guardian. Even after years, Alessandro still felt a shiver run down his spine whenever he saw the full moon. He knew that somewhere there were other werewolves waiting to be discovered again. And although he had learned to control his transformations, Alessandro never felt completely safe again, knowing that the terror of the unknown was always lurking. Alessandro continued to keep an eye on the town and the forest, always on the lookout for any sign that other werewolves were active again. He knew that the presence of these creatures was a constant reminder that the world was full of mysteries and dangers. And although the town seemed quiet, Alessandro never lost the feeling that something was always lurking, waiting to pounce. Alessandro's story became a local legend, told for generations as a reminder of the power and mystery that exist beyond what we can see. He inspired others to explore the unknown, but also to respect the natural world and its creatures. And although the werewolf's legacy was a challenge, Alessandro knew that he had become a defender of wildlife and a guardian of the forest's secrets. Alessandro knew that one day he would need to pass on the legacy to someone else. He began looking for a successor, someone who could understand and respect the curse of lycanthropy. And although the idea that someone else might suffer from the transformation worried him, Alessandro knew it was necessary to ensure that the protection of the city and the forest continued. The future was uncertain, but Alessandro was prepared to face any challenge that came his way. He knew that the life of a werewolf was full of dangers and mysteries, but also opportunities to do good. And although the full moon remained a moment of suspense, Alessandro was ready to protect what was his, knowing that he was more than just a werewolf. He was a guardian of the Castelvecchio legacy. And so, we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving werewolves. Each of them brought a unique touch of suspense and terror, showing that even in different scenarios and situations, the fear of the unknown is always present. Now we'd like to know, did you like these stories? Which one was the scariest for you? Leave a comment below and share your impressions. And if you liked the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more horror and adventure content. Activate the bell to receive notifications and stay up to date with everything that happens here.